Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I am glad that you are here. The whole gang is here. I'm up here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeff Simpson. Down in Sumter, South Carolina, we got Delmar Pete. In Safety Harbor, or this is Clearwater, I don't know. Somewhere in Pinellas County, we have Andrew Larson. And
I'm in Clearwater today.
You're in Clearwater today? Okay. And then up in Trinity, Florida, we got Timothy Miller. So guys, again, we are here. We are in the halfway point, but in September 16th is today. That means we only have a few more, like 2 weeks left while we have this early bird pricing for our conference, the Practically Pastoring Conference. And so, guys, the most affordable conference for pastors in 2025 at $39. Can somebody here tell the listener why they want to get this registration purchased before the end of this month and why they should come to the Practically Pastoring Conference?
I mean, really, it's a no-brainer. We talk about this all the time. We are encouraging you not to do ministry alone, and we're going to give you an opportunity to do just that, to get around some like-minded peoples that are in your tribe, that want to be with you and around you, and we want to support you. I think we can learn from each other. I think the conference will be better with you there. Not that you're going to be missing out, but we'll be missing out if you don't show up. So to me, no brainer. Let's go. Florida in February. Where else do you want to be?
You for sure will be missing out, though.
100% you'll be missing out.
Let that FOMO set in right now and register.
You'll be missing out, but so will we if you don't show up.
Yeah, but you will. So
for sure.
I will say my favorite part of the conference that I definitely want to do again, and I've suggested to like my denominational conference that happens every year, is when we did the note cards around the table and just put a bunch of topics and talked about best practices. And then, there's nothing like those picnic table barbecue sandwich conversations that happened last conference. And I'm looking forward to that kind of thing again. As good as the sessions were, and they were great, those, kind of off the cuff conversations are really the best part of a conference. And hopefully that's most of what the conference is going to, entail as far as like the time we spend with each other is going to be those kind of like just talk shop conversations that are really helpful.
And if you listen to the podcast, if this is something you really like, just know the conference is modeled after the same way this podcast is. If this is something you get enjoyment in watching pastors talk and ping stuff off each other and using collective wisdom, we've modeled this conference the same way. So this is your way to get involved in very, hands and feet with the podcast. So we'd love to see you. I'd love to meet you. I got to meet a few of you a couple of years ago. We've actually sparked some good friendships off of this. So, and it's been cool to see how some of the guys, and I know y'all follow them too, who were at the last conference we had, to see how their lives have changed since then. It is wild. And even right now, some of the guys in the podcast, their lives are changing right now. And it's just cool to be a part of that journey, even if we meet up just once every year. So it's pretty cool.
And you're just throwing away extra money if you don't sign up soon. Like you only have a finite amount of continuing ed money in your church budget, or if you want to make your spouse real mad, just waste the extra money it's going to take to register 2 weeks from now. So go ahead and make everybody happy, your elders, your spouse, whoever it may be,
your treasurer.
Register early. Your treasurer, come hang out now. Make it happen. Exactly. What are you waiting for?
Be a good steward of the finances that you have by coming to the conference at the lowest price possible. So go to practicallypastoringconference.com. All the details are there. We've talked about in the past about how there's going to be something special for pastors' spouses. There's going to be childcare in for that specific session. We have an Airbnb available for a certain number of pastors who want to have free housing at this conference. There are so many reasons why this is a no-brainer. And we have a great sponsor that we're going to announce soon who is going to hook us up and hook you up with a bunch of great free stuff. And we cannot wait. So go to practicallypastoringconference.com, call up your pastor friends, call up people in your network. We want to see you down in Florida in February 17th to the 19th in 2025. We hope to see you there. Speaking of being a good steward of finances, this is a special episode. We're going to actually interview a really great youth pastor out in California, a veteran youth pastor, about volunteers and things like that. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to answer this first question that came from the Facebook group. And it's a unique question. It's a practical question. Here's the question from our Facebook group. He said, Talk to me about the practicalities of setting up a Venmo/PayPal for your church. I know how to do it, but what are the potential issues I may need to think about? I have people ask all the time if we have one, but we currently do not. And I don't want to use my personal one for that. We use Breeze for our church management software and have online giving through that. I can even send people a link to an online form for them to pay for something online. So should we stick with that, or is it easy enough to use Venmo or PayPal? We talked about this a little bit before the show, but guys, what do we think? Is Venmo, PayPal a wise decision to be a place to receive offerings and tithes for the church?
I think he brings up something that's interesting. He says if they're paying for something, I think if you have a Venmo account and also set it up as a nonprofit Venmo account just for taxes and stuff, it's a little bit more work on the front end. I think it's different if you're paying for something like, registrations for camp. Here's a T-shirt from the merch store. Our church doesn't have a merch store, but you know what I mean? Different churches do. If you're paying for something, I think that's a completely different thing than if you're giving to the church. I think if he is looking to set it up for taking payments, sure, use the nonprofit Venmo account, but I would not use Venmo for online giving. I think that's a little bit scary. And so many, whether it be Planning Center, Servant Keeper, whatever church tracking software you use, they all have some kind of online giving component these days, and the percentages are pretty much the same. There's industry standards that are pretty ubiquitous everywhere. So I would use the system that your church accountant is most comfortable with for any kind of online giving. And then if you are looking for something specifically to take payments, and especially if those payments are going to go into a different account, then maybe I would look into something, but I would not set it up for any kind of recurring gift or online giving.
Venmo is a great way to acquire money by losing money. What I mean is I used Venmo the last 3 years with my personal business, and I quit a couple months ago because their prices went up. And as far as what they skim off the top, and they do the same thing with churches. They do not take into account that you are a nonprofit. So you will be taxed on that from the Venmo side of things. Plus, I think one of the fellas was saying before we booted up the cast, it's like throwing all your money in a pot and just scraping it out every week. It is not. It can be traced. If you have Venmo, you know that. But goodness gracious, is it a migraine and a headache? It is not user friendly. And I will say this: there's no recurring donation feature, which I think is important for a lot of people in the in church world now. Like when I get a lot of people want to set up a direct deposit even, or they want to have a thing where it's constantly coming out. There's no way to recur it and make that happen directly. And just quite frankly, it's not very user friendly with other platforms, like embedding it in your websites, embedding it in your socials and stuff. It is great for peer to peer. It's kind of like the equivalent of taking cash out of my wallet and giving you some. It is there's not a whole lot of transaction fees on little things like that. But when you start working in volume, it gets way more messy than it does convenient, at least in my experience. That's why we moved away from it.
So here at our church, I didn't think about the question. And you're right, Andrew. He did say to pay for stuff, and I didn't think about it that way. So at our church, we use registrations on Planning Center for events like let's say we have Financial Peace University, and so you have to have a nominal fee for the books and stuff like that. You can register through there and pay for that. Summer camp, same thing. You can use registrations to register for summer camp and pay a deposit and all that kind of stuff. And there are fees to using Planning Center registrations and things like that. I don't know anything about Breeze. Maybe Breeze has similar features. Most likely they do. But I would think for any accountant, whether it is to pay for things or for giving, if everything can kind of go through the same avenue, it's probably going to be best for your accountant at the end of the day. When you're picking up different things from different places, that's going to get really messy. I will say it's funny because for the past 2 weeks, we do have church merch. We have a lot of church merch and a lot of SKUs for different things. And we use Square, the Square app with the Square Reader. And I think there's this understanding if you're using that, and this is probably the biggest difference if you're going to talk about this world of money, is like if someone's buying a shirt from our church and they're using the Square app or a hoodie or whatever, they probably aren't going to expect a tax deduction from purchasing that. They're just like, I'm buying this shirt and this is just a normal transaction. So in the accounting perspective, when we get the money from Square transferred to our bank account, but like I don't think we're concerning ourselves of accounting that money towards their tax break at the end of the year for their taxes, for the giver's taxes. So with that being said, Venmo gets really messy outside the context of just like, paying for my side of a meal or, reimbursing someone for whatever. When you start doing it for business purposes, one, I'm not adequately enough to speak on it, but two, I think for churches, I would at minimum not do any giving towards Venmo and stuff like that. I do know that like sometimes like in our church, if a personal like church card gets used for non-personal reasons by mistake, like let's say you just grabbed the card by mistake and you paid for it, to reimburse the church, we use a PayPal to get that funds back to the church. But those are so rare instances because they shouldn't happen. Other than that, like Venmo seems like a very messy thing for your own taxes as a church, and also going to be very complicated things because the person that's going to be giving will come up in December and January and be like, hey, I gave $300 through Venmo. I want my tax statement. And now you're like, what? How do I even parse through this? And I think it'll get very, very, very messy. But for purchasing things, dude, buy the Square app. Usually the readers are free, and the charges are kind of the same charges as everywhere else. And you can look pretty pro selling church merch or even the conversation of like registrations for things using a Square app and an iPad or a Square app and a phone.
Or if you have your fancy church latte, just have that QR code that can be scanned to pay. Looks super cool.
Now, I think Square, if I'm not mistaken, uses Stripe to make the transaction. Is that correct? And so does Planning Center Giving.
Yep.
So if you're doing Square and PCO Giving, they're both going to end up actually making the transaction through Stripe, which can then go straight to QuickBooks for your treasurer. So I just don't see a reason why, like Venmo, the only thing that makes Venmo even a conversation is that people think it's a good way to do it. Like your donors think, well, can you just do it on Venmo? And I think this is an opportunity to just be like, it really just doesn't work well for the church. It also actually doesn't work well for you for the giving statement reason you said, Frank. I mean, I don't know about any other software, but Planning Center is just so easy and worth it. It's like you click one button at the end of the year. Everybody's giving statement happens. It goes to QuickBooks easy. It's easy to train people to do it. The other benefit is that anybody who logs in and does anything in the giving app, there's a record of who did what and clicked on anything, which you won't have in Venmo. So I think that's a big thing, like the transparency piece of it. If there was ever a question about who logged in and looked, you can pull up the record and it will show this email address logged in and changed this setting, and this one did this, and this one did this. So that's just another layer of protection for you. Venmo's just not made for churches. It's just not built for that.
That being said, I think there is a pastoral component that we don't want to overlook, and that is some people that's the only way they ever have learned how to do digital transfer of currency. I mean, like even my parents, it took them years to figure that out. They finally figured out Venmo, and then they show up to your church and they're so excited, and then your church says, "We use this other thing. You got to go download it instead." So I say all that to say, one of the reasons that is an advocate of Venmo, not saying that I think we should use it is what people know how to use. I hear people say that about Bibles. What's the best Bible? The one you'll read. What's the best money? It's the money you'll donate. So I'm not saying that we should. I just think there's a pastoral component. If we're going to expect people to download a new app, learn a new thing, for some people that takes 2 seconds. For some people that there's anxiety just thinking about having to do that. So I don't know if y'all have any ways that you have stepped into that space with your congregants to help them figure that out, but I'd love to hear it.
Del, do you really think that, like, I mean, I could see this maybe with like the college age Gen Zers that they use Venmo as a way to exchange money that way, but like there's not really any business. I mean, there are businesses that will accept Venmo, but like the way I see that, it would be almost in the same category as like Apple Pay. But like I don't know if like outside of the gig economy and like things like that like people are using Venmo as their debit card in a primary consistent way. Because my only argument is this, is like, if the rest of the world is not necessarily using Venmo as their primary transaction mechanism, then why does the church have to like bend over backwards to kind of figure out ways? I always see Venmo amongst churches when it's like kind of church plants who are like not even like in pre-launch stages, or like missionaries trying to get money, right? And it's just like we will take any mode of money as possible because we need it, right? But like, I'm assuming he's an established church. Like, I don't know, Andrew, you seem like you have an answer to this.
Yeah, so there are people that use Venmo primarily, and there are people that, quite frankly, don't want to transfer that money to their bank, because once it's transferred to the bank, then there's the record. So, which is no different than I have a waitress who is claiming, that they're making $12 an hour in tips when really they're making $20 in tips, and they're going to give in cash. Now, there's other things that could be discussed with that, but there are people who keep their money in Venmo specifically so that it doesn't get transferred to their bank for tax purposes and for accounting purposes.
This sounds real. Like, I mean, this sounds like it's kind of getting on the sketch area where it's like,
but also like I know a lot of landlords
are they avoiding taxes
because Venmo is set up as a peer-to-peer thing. And so,
well, not this year. As of July, Venmo will be sending statements of everything.
They've just recently changed it. So like anything over $300, now Venmo is going to track as, well, you're not just giving somebody $300 for dinner. So anything more than, whatever that specific number is, they don't do that. So there is the closest hospital to my church. All of the valets use their Venmo for tips because who carries around cash anymore? And so it's great. As a former valet, I completely get it, because that way it's a completely different system than what their payroll thing is. And so for them, they keep that in their Venmo account. Again, I realize that we're talking about a percent of the population that way, but it does make sense for some people to keep money in that specific account. When, Tim and I will live stream funerals for people. And if I get paid via PayPal, Venmo, or Apple Pay for those, I keep that money in those specific accounts, because that's like my fun money account. If it doesn't hit my bank, then it never gets budgeted. And so like my wife's 40th birthday is a week from today. And so she hasn't seen any of the money that's come out for stuff, because I've had money in different accounts that I can keep for that. Tim's looking at me like, no, that's wrong. I don't have like a lot of money. I've got like $300 here.
Yellow flag, buddy. Also, you just outed your wife for turning 40. Come on, man.
I mean, I'm about to be 42, so she's allowed to turn 40.
Right. The reason why Andrew eats McDonald's every Monday is he uses his fun money
Apple
from Venmo.
Pay, baby.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
My wife will never know.
I don't know, sweetheart. What are you talking about? One thing, just to kind of echo what Del was saying about the pastoral moment. In our church, especially with older people, we have accepted kind of weird gifts at times. Like, hey, I've got this penny stock that I need to offload.
Yeah, dude.
If you sit on it for, I can get a write-off now, but if you sit on it for 2 years, it might be this, it might not be. Can I give this penny stock to the church? And we've been like, yeah, okay. So there comes a time, if the amount is big enough, where it's it started with a yes, we'll take the 3.5% credit card processing fee, or yes, we'll take the $2 flat fee for the electronic check. And so there are times and amounts that other things we've said, hey, as a church, we'll take the time to figure this out. Our accountant will figure it out. We'll eat the fee. And so I think in general, like online giving via Venmo, no, bad idea. But if someone is a landlord who hasn't, transferred money from the Venmo for their apartment complex into their account and they want to give it to the church, if it's a big enough number, it's probably worth the half an hour of Googling it's going to take to get it figured out. Now, again, you should probably make sure that your church members are not doing anything illegal with their money and that they're not using the church to launder money. But we make exceptions for other people when it comes to gifts to the church. I don't think we should completely say, no, absolutely not. I think probably not, but let's talk specifics is probably the best answer.
I mean, for sure, in the next few years, there's going to be somebody come up with an integration that'll work with Venmo. It's like, honestly, checks are pretty annoying. There's a whole process you got to go through.
They're super annoying.
online giving through PCO is way quicker than a check, because you got to, like, somebody's got to sign the back or stamp the back, fill out the thing, take it to the bank. Like, there's a whole thing. And so it's just funny because we're almost talking like probably pastors did a generation ago about moving to online giving, and checks are so much better and easier. And how are you going to, so it's like things just keep moving and shifting. And I bet you there'll be an integration for Venmo at some point. And if that happens, I mean, go for it.
Churches that have a give through crypto on their website. Now that's
wild.
That's not where we're going to be anytime soon, with our median age being where it is. If you are in San Francisco, or you're in Austin, or you're in some place where there's a lot of people that's where they have their currency, I think removing whatever obstacles you can remove for people giving is a good thing, especially with an initial gift, because once someone starts giving, then the ball is going to get start rolling, and they'll start figuring it out. And this is not just like, hey, as a church, we want your money, but just from a discipleship standpoint, you want to remove whatever obstacles you can do to someone being faithful. And if that means you have to figure out how to go through a Venmo account, then that sucks and it's going to be annoying. What would you do to get that same person to join a small group? What would you do to get that same person to want to be baptized? Like, you would do the annoying things, you would do the tedious things. And if you think that giving is part of the discipleship process, you would kind of jump through the hoops. Again, for the record, I think Venmo for online giving is a bad idea in general, but in particular, if a 20-year-old is like, hey, Pastor Andrew, how do I get this $20 to the church? This is what I have. Heck yeah, let's talk.
That was the most Dr. Andrew answer you've given yet. That was so good.
Andrew,
in particular, in general, man, that was good.
You nailed it. I think what's important here, Andrew, you're right on. We have a policy in place for these things. So having a policy in place is very helpful. So we have accepted crypto, we have accepted penny stocks, we have accepted bonds. What we have told the donor is we will accept that. We will not sit on that. Whatever the cash value is today, it gets cashed out today and deposited, and you get your tax write-off just like that. So having a policy in place is really big for those. And again, those are not your normal everyday transactions, but we have the same idea, Andrew. We will jump through a few extra hoops, and we've had it. We're working through a lengthy policy right now because, a process. Someone just passed away, and we were written into their life insurance policy.
Wow!
So we received a 90-page document that we as elders had to work through.
Heck yeah!
We haven't even seen the number yet, but we are working through this process because we know, hey, that this was a big deal to this particular family, and we're gonna take the extra steps to do that. Now, for this specific question, I can speak from experience. When I first got to Lakeview, we were not taking online payments yet. We had Servant Keeper, and at that time, Servant Keeper didn't even have a way to collect online payments. That's how ancient this was. This was back in 2010.
Servant Keeper.
It was awful. The worst.
In 2010?
It was the MS-DOS.
Wow.
Membership databases.
Wow.
So we said, okay, let's set up a PayPal. So we did. We set up a PayPal. That's how we collected and it was very small because back then, not all people gave online. But at the end of every year, it became a nightmare, Jeff. Like you said, like our accountant was like, this is bonkers. Like this does not integrate well into our system.
They're like manually doing giving statements.
You had to.
Yeah.
Like you were going through emails and whatnot. And then we'd hear from people saying, hey, here's my email. I gave this. This is the wrong amount. And we're like, gosh, having to square those up every year. And it was an absolute mess. That's when we made the shift, I think back in 2014, 2015, over to Planning Center. We opened up Planning Center giving, and that has made the world of difference for us. I know Breeze well. I know a lot of churches that use Breeze. Their online stuff is great. It's very comparable to Planning Center. So if you're talking weekly tithes and offering and just collections, yes, use your church management software. Talk to your accountant, talk to your office manager, whatever needs to happen. Now, I do see a very specific question here, which you guys have already addressed, but it's paying for stuff. That's a whole separate thing. So, Frank, you're right about this. You guys doing Square is the right way to do this because we do not provide a tax-deductible receipt when you buy a T-shirt. In fact, that's wrong as a church if you do. So we have to go through something separate. We use CheddarUp. I don't know if you guys have heard of CheddarUp. It's very similar to Square. However, they are very friendly with nonprofits. They make it very, very easy for the donors, just like Planning Center. The donors actually click cover the fee. So then the fee that you would pay as a church, you no longer pay, just like Planning Center does. The person buying the T-shirt, they get charged the 3.9% credit card fee. instead of the church. So then the church gets 100% of the profits. Same way with Planning Center online giving. And Andrew, to your point, it's very simple. We literally have a QR code sitting up front. You want to buy a t-shirt, you scan the QR code, boom, takes you to the online form. You don't have to download an app. It's nothing. It takes you right to the form to just hit your payment. It's pretty sweet. So that's kind of the shift we've made as a church. And the Cheddar Up stuff is only like 4 months old for us because we were collecting checks and cash for t-shirts and it was getting really annoying. And people were like, we just want to pay with our phones. So we're like, got it. So we actually researched like 5 different companies. I asked our office administrator to make the call because she's the one who's going to be, seeing that stuff the most. And she said, look, Cheddar Up was easy. They worked well with me. And I said, doesn't bother me. Go for it. So we've been using Cheddar Up for the last couple of months and it's worked well for
all right. Hold on. Imagine those of you that are listening to this, you're sitting at a round table in a beautiful youth room in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and you're talking about online giving. And Tim says, hey, he's a guy at your table, and he says, hey, have you heard of this app, Cheddar Up? And you're like, I've never heard of this. What's this all about? And then you start talking about it, and you write it down, and you solve a problem in your ministry that you didn't even know how to solve. $39 is nothing.
In a couple minutes.
I mean, incredible. Tim pulls out his phone, shows you how easy it is to work.
And then you can buy awesome Sunday Cool t-shirt that Lakeview Church has for sale.
That very day.
Yep.
You can use the app before you commit to it for your church.
Incredible. You can get the user experience before you even open the back end to see what it's like. This is
where do I sign up?
practicallypastoringconference.com.
There we go.
Get there right now. Also, to take it full circle, Frank, my favorite part of this entire discussion is that you're doing Financial Peace University registrations on credit cards. Awesome.
They're using debit cards. They can use debit cards. That's funny.
You don't do cash in an envelope for those? What the heck, man?
You're right.
Can you register for Financial Peace University using Venmo? That's the question.
I don't know. I will say, Andrew, you brought up a good point about reaching people where they are. There's a real reality at one of our campuses where it is literally from homeless people to C-suite individuals and everybody in between. And so because of that, there's going to be some interesting people with interesting financial backgrounds that might want to take that first step in generosity, and that might be trying to figure out if they could use Venmo. So there's a valid point. I was a never Venmoer, and I'm now moved to likely not wise, but maybe not never now. It's funny, as we're talking about this, like we talked about Planning Center for Giving. I know at our church, we use PushPay, which is another big giving for churches for that. And like you mentioned Cheddar Up, I mentioned Square. There's a whole other category, a whole other cottage industry when it comes to like raising support for mission trips. There's Christian organizations that have created like infrastructure for that, because a lot of people will want to use what are those like big secular ones? They're like for like
GoFundMe.
Yeah, like a GoFundMe. There's
Visa?
another one I've never heard of that one. Yeah. But like
Visa card? You never heard of that?
Visa card. No, I'm talking about like a GoFundMe or something like that, where like people will use that to kind of support missions. But there's like Christian ones that like specifically for churches that it'd be interesting to like talk about those like one-off websites that we use for the specific things that like this that kind of simplify the process. But we'll put these links in the show notes, so that way if you're like, hey, I want to check out Cheddar Up, I want to check out what Planning Center Giving looks like, compare it to what I have, we'll have those links in the show notes. So with that being said, we have a special guest I want to introduce you to. Her name is Kristen Lascola. She is a 20-year youth ministry veteran out in California, and I talked to her about volunteers and volunteer development, which even if you're not in youth ministry, this is a good conversation about volunteering and volunteer development, as well as I asked this question. She's been there for 20 years. How does a church keep a quality youth pastor for 20 years? Where the average kind of tenure of a youth pastor is about like a year and a half. This is 20 years. This is pretty impressive. What do churches need to do to keep quality youth pastors and to find those quality youth pastors and to maintain them? So listen to this interview, and then we'll be back with our book recommendation. I am so excited to talk with my friend here, Kristen. Over the years, after doing like 15 years of student ministry and trying to create resources for youth workers and people, youth pastors and youth workers in student ministry. I just love real practical wisdom and advice to make youth ministries awesome. And that kind of overflowed into what we're doing now. I'm practically pastoring. And so since I've stepped away from youth ministry, still have a lot of good relationships with youth workers and download youth ministry and folks over at like Orange and different places. I found this YouTube channel when I was forced as a campus pastor to say, hey, we are in a season without youth pastor. You have to go back in there. You have to find new games. You have to play a Christmas party. And I'm like, I haven't done this in a couple of years. I'm going to go Google what I can find. And everything I Googled showed up this person's videos. And this person's videos has been such a wealth of resources for me as I had to step back into youth ministry for a season. Now we have a new youth pastor, and now I'm just forwarding all these videos to him. But Kristen, I am so glad you're here. So for people who don't know you, could you share who you are, where you're at, what you're doing, and just generally who you are? Because I think you're an amazing person.
Oh, thanks, Frank. Well, I'm so glad that you found us the way that we wanted to be found, like by the youth pastor who's like, I just need help. And just like you said, the word practical. So that I take that as a huge compliment because it sounds like the mission we have is being accomplished. So I am a middle school pastor, North Coast Church, which is in Southern California. We're a multi-site church. So I'm one of the middle school pastors. We have about 7 different campuses in Southern California, and then a few sprinkled around the country in some different places. And I've been working with middle schoolers at North Coast, all at the same church, for the last 20 years. So we just kind of celebrated my 20-year little milestone at church this year in April. And I have kind of my own side ministry too, which is how you found us. You didn't find us at North Coast Church, but my husband, Jeff, and I in 2020 started the Ministry Coach podcast. And we're on YouTube and obviously all the podcast platforms to be what you said. We wanted to be, his word to me was, be what you wish you had 20 years ago. Because I was like, podcasts, like, I'm a youth pastor, I'm busy, I don't have time to add one more thing. He goes, no, but really be what you wish you had, because it took you a long time to learn all this. Imagine the person just starting out, what do you have to offer them? So then we started kind of like that course if someone wanted more, but it's growyouryouthministry.com. And through that, we were able to reach youth pastors who are kind of just like, whether they're seasoned or just starting out, they're like, I need help. And, Googling is one thing, but I need a course to take me through like how to get there. So those are the hats we wear. Yes, I'm still a practicing youth pastor, and then the ministry coach stuff we do on the side, and meet some great people doing that too.
Kristen, when years ago, when I first did, I had a YouTube channel called "This Is What I Did Last Night" or "This Is What We Did Last Night," and it was literally like a YouTube video and a podcast that I put on Thursday mornings, where I just literally process what I did in youth group to Wednesday night.
Oh, I love that.
And then that turned into 15 minutes with Frank. And what's interesting is what you just said is exactly why I started it. I was like, when I first did youth ministry, I was on an island. I was alone. No other youth pastor would answer my phone calls. And I'm just dying out here trying to teach the book of Leviticus to my kids. And no one was telling me that might not be the best book to teach right now. And I wish I had someone who could coach me or mentor me or just tell me like, hey, let's get together once a month so we can just kind of talk shop. And the beauty of social media, the beauty of YouTube is like a guy who was in Tampa, Florida could have found a video like you all the way out in California and be like, that's how you did your Christmas party. That's how you take attendance. That's how you get volunteers. Like I am so grateful for folks like you. You are awesome. All right. So I have a couple youth ministry questions today.
All right.
And the first one is I feel like it's going to be in your wheelhouse. It's all about volunteers. And so easy question. Where are they? Right? Why is it so hard to find them? Why is it so hard to maintain them? I can always find like the 19-year-old, 20-year-old guy who doesn't want to ever graduate youth group, but I can't find like the solid person that says, I'm going to love these students and mentor them and be more than a chaperone, be more than a warm body. So do you have any tips on how we can think about recruiting volunteers and getting eyes on our ministry? And Kristen, you're at a church, right? That's multi-site, that has a lot of ministries going on. I'm sure you don't get a lot of stage time every Sunday to promote the
No.
middle school ministry. So like, what creative ways are you doing to get eyes for volunteers to come to your group?
Yeah, that's a super like sore spot, right? For so many youth pastors. And one of my friends, he was the junior high pastor for a long time at our Vista campus. And he said, you're always recruiting. Like sometimes people would see recruitment as a season or a weekend or like some kind of campaign at a church. Like it's time to find these volunteers. But I think shifting that mindset to you're always in a state of recruiting. Everyone you meet, everyone you come in contact with could be a potential volunteer. And so here's what I've realized where my volunteers come from. And it's a few different categories. Number one, kind of probably what you were mentioning, is an ex-student. So those younger 19, 20-year-olds, they had come through my program. They were probably involved in student leadership when they were in my program. They went on to high school. They were still involved in student leadership. They're out of high school, want to serve as a small group leader, and the first place they come back to is me. So that is a huge, but I had to wait for that fruit, because you figure I have to wait for you to go all the way through my ministry, all the way through high school, then come back all the way back down and start over. So that takes years. The other place I found that I get leaders from, I've had some parents, and I know that can be like, right when I said that, some people probably had a visceral reaction, like, no, don't say that. Honestly, some of the best volunteers that I still have to this day, their children are long gone. They started because their kid was in my ministry, but their kid has now come back to be a volunteer because they're all grown up and they're serving side by side. And they have been dynamite, like some of the best people I've ever found. So never discount a parent who wants to help. And I think youth pastors get suspicious, like, why are you here? Do you just want to keep track of your kid? Oh, well, so be it. But if they're incredible, I mean, those people, you want older people in your ministry too. You want parents with the eyes and the mind of a parent. The other place I find volunteers is through my own personal relationships and friends at church, like maybe someone in my Bible study. And once you get like enough of that category, like maybe a little bit from each category, a few ex-students, a few parents, a few from your own personal connections, the coolest thing will start to happen where if you're taking really good care of your volunteers and it's a great place to serve and you've made it magnetic and dynamic and people are loving their experience serving, they will start recruiting for you. And that is kind of the pinnacle, the sweet spot that you want to get to. This year alone, there was a life group, that's what we call our adult small groups, who they started recruiting everyone in that life group. Like, well, we're already serving. Why don't you come and help on Tuesdays? Well, you're not part of it. Why don't you come? And they just started pulling each other, or they'll say, oh, I have a friend. She's been looking to get involved somewhere. Do you have an opening? And so I don't even have to ask people anymore. They're asking their friends because they love serving. So I think the hardest stage is the beginning of like getting that momentum. But if you hang in there long enough, that will come, whether it's those ex-students or people figuring out, oh, I'm going to bring my friends to this, just like our students invite their friends to youth group. That same model, if the students love it, they'll invite their friends. You won't have to beg them to do it. If your leaders love it, they will invite their friends and family to serve. You won't have to beg anybody. Right now, have a waiting list of volunteers because I'm like, I just don't have a spot for you. I don't want you to just come and like hang out and not have anything to do. Like, like it just takes on a life of its own if we're doing it well and taking care of people.
I love that when your volunteers are recruiting for you and they're inviting their friends, their life group friends, their people they, like that is going to be stickier than the youth pastor making a cold call and being like, hey, I see that you filled out this form that you want to serve and you don't know, like that's going to be good. I would often tell my leaders like, hey, the volunteer team is this like very special organism that like if one person comes in here and ruins the vibe, it's going to affect the whole ministry. So
Yeah.
who is someone that you already trust, that you would love to serve with, that maybe isn't serving somewhere, that we can like, that you could tap their shoulder and then I can come close for you, or I can like help like
Yeah.
tell you like this is where we can have for you. I love that. I think the first step is the youth worker telling their own volunteers, hey, can you guys be my eyes and ears and help me out? Because oftentimes it feels like all the pressure's on the youth pastor to go
Mhm.
meet some adults they don't know and try to convince them to hang out with teenagers for a couple hours a week, and that feels like a daunting task. I love that. So let's say I have the volunteers. They're here, they're in the space, they're the warm bodies. We have the right ratios, 5-1, 7-1, whatever it is, and we have small group leaders, we have people leading games, whatever the case may be. What do I do now? Like you could have a volunteer that's in the student ministry for 4 years, but like we haven't developed them, like we haven't like built them up to ask for more. What does good volunteer development look like for you? How do you pour into them? How do you help them grow?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's kind of like the now what, and I will say back to that other question too. One method of recruitment, not to underestimate, pray. I've prayed and begged God, I need a girl leader. I don't know where I'm going to find her. Like, where is this person going to come from? I've asked everyone I know. And then I'll randomly get an email. And because I've just been praying for months, like, God, please, please, please. Hey, I heard you need someone. I'm kind of interested. Like, that's happened more than I can say. So don't neglect God working on our behalf. So now we have the volunteers, and what do we do with them? So the number one thing leaders want is you. I think that took me a while to realize, and I had to ask them, like, what do you guys want? Why do you stick around? And they, over and over and over again, it was me, and not like, because you're so cool, but everybody, like our students want to be seen, known, heard, and loved. And that's what the small group leader does. The small group leader wants to be seen, heard, known, and loved. And that's the youth pastor's job. And it kind of clicked for me years ago. And I remember Josh Griffin saying this too. Like, he's like, I remember the moment that I realized I'm no longer a pastor to youth. I'm a pastor to leaders who lead youth. And he's like, I just had to like cross that bridge, like mentally and emotionally, of like, yes, I'm a student pastor, but my leaders are what need my time, attention, love, and all of that. So number one, it's a relationship with you. So I do that through, I try to reach out. I have a team of 25, so it's hard to give all of them time, attention every single week. So I try to choose 2 or 3 a week. Okay, who could I grab coffee with? Who can I take a walk with? Who can I write an encouraging note to? Who can I text an encouraging message to? And I just like bite off what I can chew. I could do 3 a week, probably, maybe sometimes only 2, depending on how busy I am. And then I try to do things all together so that they're connecting with each other. And like that organism you were just talking about, I love that you use that word. I think that's like so accurate, that it is this living, breathing thing with its own culture and dynamic, and they need each other. So now I'm scheduling things where we're all hanging out, having fun. And now you're a part of an organism that's vibrant and alive. It's not just like serving and clocking in, leaving, serving, clocking and leaving, but there's people that you're excited and look forward to. So I think that's part of the staff development is, you just have to like being here. Serving should never feel like a burden. So what do? We go roller skating, we play volleyball, we are competitive, we play full contact broom ball, like leave them bleeding on the corner and score that point. We get crazy and we have so much fun. And then like on a very like practical level, they just need to be well equipped to do their job. So that is part of the training, is like they need to know what your expectations are, the church policy and expectations are, to keep them out of trouble and hot water, whether that's a social media policy, a student contact policy, whatever it might be. Make sure that they're well aware, and then really set them up for success. So leaders do they have the talk sheet well in advance? Do they know what they're talking about in their small group? Do they know how to lead a small group? Do they know how to discipline a kid if it comes to that? Do they know how to navigate a conversation away from a dominator? Do they know how to draw out a student who is not participating. If someone says something concerning, what's the protocol for that? So you want to set them up to know how to do their job, whatever context that is for your church. So those are like the real practical skills, the nuts and bolts that they feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing and I like doing it. Like that's two things. It's like the head and the heart. The head is like, I know how to do what you've asked me to do, and I don't feel like I'm guessing at what you want or floundering. The heart is, I love being here because I love working with you and for you and together. We have to be real. I mean, there's going to be the days where their small group is rude and obnoxious and not listening. What's going to keep them coming back is relationships with you and with each other, just like a student. What keeps students coming back? Relationships with their leader and other students. And that's what makes a volunteer team dynamic and healthy and thriving. And like the word you used, again, I love, is sticky. Like, how long are we keeping these people? If you have a revolving door, one of those two things is probably missing, right? It's either they don't know how to do their job, they're not equipped to do it, or they don't like doing their job because they're lonely, or something along those lines.
Kristen, what I love what you just said is, instead of focusing on like curriculum, because the reality is we can find curriculum. Like there are resources from DYM, resources that we probably have inherited in our ministries, maybe stuff you've created your own, that like can be passed around in terms of like what specific things that we need to learn, like how small group management. That's not like that's important. But what you said in the beginning was something that also was illuminating somewhere halfway through my youth ministry journey, when I realized, oh, I'm a youth pastor, I'm a student ministries pastor, but if I primarily focus a lot of my pastoral care and attention to leaders, those leaders are going to love and pastoral care the students.
Yes.
And the healthier and happier the leaders are, the healthier, the happier the student ministry is. It doesn't mean that I don't still show up to a football game. It doesn't mean that I don't show up to a recital. It doesn't mean that I don't like teach on a youth night, but it does mean that like my attention can't be squarely just on the students, because you won't retain the volunteers because the volunteers aren't being poured into. And I think for a youth pastor, so much of our ministry is thinking, I got to get these warm bodies in this room because I can't do this alone. But we have to focus on the discipleship of the kids. But if you take a step back and say, these adult leaders are serving here as a part of their discipleship. And so if I can serve them and be a part of their discipleship and guide them spiritually and care for them, then it only is going to overflow, pouring into these students. And then you're literally have a microcosm of the Great Commission. You're making disciples who are now making disciples of students.
Wow.
And it's beautiful, right?
Very well
I love how you said that, like, what they need is me. And it's not about how awesome and like how great you are, but like you are in many ways not just a pastor to the students, you're the pastor to the volunteers. And I love that you focus on that. That right there, like every youth pastor in the country needs to hear, because so many young youth pastors go into this thinking, I just want to make an impact in the life of teenagers. And what's ironic is the way you do that is reaching adults who can now, in a very systematic way, impact 2 or 3 kids when you have a youth group of 20 or 30, right? Like, I love that.
Well, and it's a different skill set too. And I think it catches leaders off guard because you relate to students and care for them differently. Like I was at an appointment, my phone rang and she's like, do you need to get that? And I'm like, no. And I was like looking at my phone and I was thinking, and it was a ministry call, I could tell. And I'm like, if it is a student, no problem. I feel like I can deal with student issues like that, like with the snap of a finger. I'm like, if it's a leader, I'm like, whew, that's a different skill set. And that's harder, to deal with like a leader issue or, something going on with your team member. It's a whole different gear. And I don't know that youth pastors are always prepared for that. Cause like you said, they're like, I'm great with students, I should be a student pastor. It's like, yeah, you are good with students and that is important. And we have to still have that skill. However, you've got to be able to tap into your leading skill. Leading leaders is definitely a skill that doesn't always come naturally, that can be sharpened though. Like if you're not good at it, like right off the bat, like you can sharpen and develop that skill.
100%. This is where good coaching or just a good network of other youth workers can come in and be like, hey, how are you scheduling your week to make sure you make time for your leaders. And like
Right.
hearing how I love how you say, about 3 hours a week, I can like write some letters, or I love when I was a youth pastor, I was like, okay, I can like go be alone with a guy leader, but what about my female leaders? I could raise up a female leader to just care for the female leaders, but I want to get face-to-face time with my female leaders. So like I would like, hey, let's go meet at the mall. We'll walk around the mall and I can talk to you. And I also have to go pick up some stuff I have to buy, right? Like creative ways to like pour into leaders with the parameters you have. Like, this is great. You've been at your church for 20 years. I mean, that means your church is taking care of you. Like they must love you, and they must doing a good job there, because I mean, the statistics change every so often. Like the average lifespan of a youth pastor is maybe 18 months to 3 years or something for a church. COVID rocked the church in America, in terms of like hiring. People had to get let go. Ministries had to reorient. A lot of youth pastors maybe got into other roles because they realized they were gifted in other ways in their churches, whatever. So if you were talking to a pastor or an elder right now that's like, we want to hire a youth pastor, but we want a Kristen. We want a Kristen that's going to be here for 20 years serving our middle school students. Like, what are the things that you would tell them that need to like rewire their mind to not just think, all right, we're going to give a person, $40,000 a year and a parsonage in the back, and that'll be enough. Like, what is it that we need to like offer to youth pastors, or what should churches think about when they are looking for youth pastors to really have that youth pastor that's going to stay for the long term?
Yeah. I had a conversation with a pastor recently, and he was hiring a youth pastor, and he was very hesitant. And he was like, I don't know if this is the person. I don't know. And I said, well, the character is there. I said, remains to be seen, like this competency. I said, but here's where you come into play. I said, you are going to be the one qualify this person. They're going to need you to hold their hand. Probably, I'm going to say, for at least the first 6 months to a year, you being all over them and helping them, discipling them, training them. You should be at the big events with them, the camps with them. And I think it's hard to find a youth pastor. I don't know that leadership development is always done really well at churches. And so when you're looking for this person, they might not seem qualified. And it's like, well, given some mentorship, like you were saying, with some coaching, they definitely could become qualified. Are you willing to put in the work it takes to get them there? Now, I know we all want a ready-made person who is like, but check myself all the time, because you just said, well, if they want to hire a Kristen, do you know, I was useless when I first started. I was absolutely a joke, useless, because I didn't know how to work. I didn't know how to do ministry. I didn't know, so I check myself sometimes with like some of my younger leaders where I'm like, why do they not get it? Like, obviously you do this, this, and this. And then I think, who was like 18-year-old Kristen? Like, I was useless. And I'm so thankful that I had a pastor over me who was so patient and continued to mentor me, continued to train me, continued to pour into me. And the reason, like you said, I've been at my church as long as I have is because they do take care of us. It's so much on the job training that they develop you into the leader and the person that they want you to be, like they, with such a long leash. It's not like, we're in some like cookie cutter program. We're all able to express our leadership individually, but they have trained me so much over the years. Like, okay, what kind of leader are you? Let's take this assessment. Let's bring in a consultant. Let's do a training. Let's do a coaching. Let's do this leadership exercise. Let's do this event. Let's do, like, they're always sharpening and training us. They don't just sit back and say, well, what do you got? It's like, well, what can we pull out of you? And that is contagious, because now that's how I lead my ministry, of like, these leaders come to me raw, or these interns come to me raw. And it's like, what do you guys want to do? I'll help you fly as high as you want. I'm here to help. Like, do you want to try this? Do you want to try that? Do you want me to help you grow here? Do you want me to help you grow there? So it's just a mentality of, we're always coaching, developing, training, lifting up, building up, like letting them stand on our shoulders and taking really good care of people, I wouldn't be at my church as long as I have if they had me by the throat and I wasn't allowed to do anything or make any decisions or try anything or fail forward in any way, like they put absolute trust in me, but they also put absolute training in me. It's like, we're going to give you and resource you everything you need to succeed, and we're going to give you the freedom to do it. They kind of threw me in the deep end and said, swim. And there were some hard years there, but I always had their support. So yeah, who are you? I mean, when we're looking to hire someone, we've really got to have that sobering look of what commitment am I willing to put into this person? Especially in ministry. Like, ministry is a lot of soft skills that maybe nobody's flexed that muscle before. How do we expect them to come in and know how to be a leader of leaders, know how to teach a sermon? I mean, the age of seminary graduates is, even if you are a seminary graduate, okay, where's your soft skills? Like, that's what ministry takes. Like, so you can teach through Leviticus, to a bunch of 12-year-olds, like you were saying, but where's the soft skills that are going to keep you in there and keep you magnetic so that people want to serve with you?
I love that. So yeah, it's about like, you might need to take a risk on a younger, maybe more inexperienced person that might have a couple tangibles, like maybe they can teach, or maybe they are a gatherer, but they don't have maybe all the other soft skills. Maybe like administrative skills are not there. But like, if I love this idea of like, when you're in the interview process with a youth pastor and saying like, here's what we need from you, and here's my commitment to you as the
Yes.
pastor. I'm going to plug you in to a network. I'm going to resource you with a coaching cohort or whatever resources we need, and like send you to a conference or two. Like, I think it's, people want the 20-year experienced Kristen today with a fresh out of college experience, right?
Yeah.
Like age or whatever, and or price tag. And I think like the reality is you can get a more inexperienced youth pastor, someone that's hungry for ministry, but needs someone to walk alongside them. And
Yes.
where a lot of youth pastors fail or get out of there is because they're not being poured into. They see the other church down the street that is offering a person in their network so many resources, or they get burnt out because they have all these expectation, all this responsibility, not really a ton of authority, and the expectations overcome are bigger than what they can reasonably output because they're not being coached. And so I love that. That's really good.
Yeah. Well said.
Kristen, how can we find you? Like, if someone's listening to this, or like, I want to listen to her I want to listen to her channel, I want to get part of the coaching thing, I want to find you. How can we find you? And all this stuff will be in the show notes.
Yeah. So we are all over YouTube, and everything on there is free, and we release an episode every single Thursday. So we have lots of episodes. You can go back if you're just hearing about us in the archives. And, we've heard people like, I just binge watched everything because I just started and I need help. So we're just search Ministry Coach, the Ministry Coach podcast. That's our YouTube channel. We're on all the podcast platforms if you'd rather just listen in your car or whatever. Yeah, the course is growyouryouthministry.com. So if you go to that, there's coaching options. Like, I do one-on-one coaching. If you're a part of the course, you get group coaching and monthly calls where we talk all things youth ministry. You can ask me anything at any time. And then you get all these courses of basically Youth Ministry 101. We go through these modules of like, hey, how do you run a budget? Let me tell you, here's how we do it. Number one, this. And like you said, it's all practical. We don't talk a lot of theory, because I remember being young and being like, yeah, I get the why. Tell me just how to do my job. I'm dying. And so that's what I do. I just tell you how to do your job. All the spiritual reasons we weave in there and we know, but on a Monday morning, you need to know how to do your job. So we go through budget, we go through event planning, we go through volunteer training recruitment. I teach you how to plan events. I teach you how to train your leaders. I teach you everything that young me wishes I would have known and had. So that's growyouryouthministry.com. But yeah, check out the podcast, Ministry Coach Podcast, and Yeah, we do stuff every single week.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kristen. All the links that she mentioned are in the show notes. Please reach out to Kristen. She's great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Frank.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. All of her links and the way to connect with her is in the show notes. But now, before we wrap up, Andrew, we want to give a book recommendation every single week. Andrew, what's a recommendation that you have enjoyed that you want to recommend to the show?
I am recommending Surprised by Doubt. I don't have the physical copy with me because I am at home right now, as opposed to being at church, but it is Josh Chatraw and Jack Carson. And in this day and age where we are seemingly reading about people deconstructing each and every day and week, this is how disillusionment can invite us into a deeper faith. A lot of the same issues that have been causing people to disengage from their faith, they are challenging the readers to use those same situations to dig deeper into their faith. And it's been a fantastic read. So Surprised by Doubt by Chatraw and Carson.
I love it. Hey, again, we've been talking about this. Go to theproductivepastoringconference.com. We want to see you there in February. Beyond that, we're in our Facebook group. If you post a question in the Facebook group, there's a good chance we will bring it up on the show. And we're on Instagram and YouTube also. We've been putting clips of like shorts and reels of our podcast on there, and you can see the full video of every episode on YouTube and also on Spotify if you want to enable that feature to watch the video on Spotify. With that being said, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Delmar Pete.
I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is Proudly Pastoring. See you next week. Bye.